For Christopher, keeping his boss happy is part of the job. His paycheck depends on it, so saying no to Ms. Samantha isn't really an option. Samantha would often visit the warehouse where Christopher worked, venting her frustrations about life and, eventually, her unhappy marriage. Over time, her visits became more personal and feelings started to develop, at least on her end. Before long, Samantha's behavior became inappropriate, her hands wandering while she complained about how her husband no longer cared to make her happy in bed. Hello, and welcome to our channel. Today, we're diving into another shocking and disturbing real-life story. This one comes from Malatya, Turkey, and involves a lonely housewife who, instead of focusing on her family and responsibilities, found herself entangled in relationships with not one, but two young and attractive security guards working at her home. What started as a mutually beneficial arrangement took a dark and horrifying turn, ending in betrayal and tragedy. What exactly happened in this bizarre and chilling case? Let's break it down. Before we start, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and share this video with your friends. Now let's dive into the story. Meet Ethan Benjamin. Born in 1975, Ethan worked his way up to becoming a successful businessman by the age of 31. His rise to success wasn't easy. It involved years of trial and error before he finally hit his stride and opened an office in Malatya, Turkey. In 2002, Ethan got married, but the relationship was far from perfect. The marriage only lasted 3 years, as both parties admitted they were incompatible. Rumors swirled about the reasons for their split. Some claimed Ethan was infertile, much to the disappointment of his wife's family, who had been hoping for children. Others suggested that his wife had been unfaithful, while more scandalous gossip painted Ethan as a drunkard with a wandering eye. Following the divorce, Ethan worked hard to clear his name, stating that the separation was simply because they no longer loved each other. In 2012, Ethan, now 37, nearly remarried. Unfortunately, the woman he planned to marry turned out to be a con artist. She disappeared with the money he had given her for wedding preparations, along with his credit card and car. Heartbroken and embarrassed, Ethan was left traumatized and wary of relationships. That is, until he met Samantha. She was working part-time at one of Ethan's offices when they crossed paths. Sparks flew, and after a few years of dating, the two tied the knot in 2015. Ethan was 40, and Samantha was 35. What seemed like a fresh start for Ethan soon spiraled into an unimaginable sequence of events, leading to betrayal, heartbreak, and tragedy. Stay tuned as we uncover the full story behind this unsettling case. One of the hopes in marriage is to have children. After a few years, Samantha still hadn't shown any signs of pregnancy. When the couple sought medical advice, they were both declared perfectly healthy. It just wasn't their time yet. With this realization, they decided to apply for child adoption. They wanted someone to brighten their days and eventually care for them in their old age. After all, what's the point of having a big house, lots of money, and abundant wealth without the sound of a child's laughter? For Samantha and Benjamin, the name family didn't have to mean a child born from their own blood. They shared a mutual desire for a child, and in September 2018, they adopted a baby, showering them with love and care as if the child were their own. This added to their already enviable image, especially when Benjamin officially became a city council member in Malatya, Turkey, in 2019. A complete family, a loving couple and their adorable child, only strengthened his public reputation. Samantha loved to share the joy of her little family. People admired their household and were often surprised by how deeply connected they seemed, even if they didn't know the child was adopted. Benjamin's kindness and generosity also became widely known. As a successful businessman with enough wealth to retire early, he was often approached by people seeking help, and he assisted them whenever he could. Meanwhile, Samantha focused on social activities and raising their son, with the help of a trusted household assistant. In May 2021, a young man named Anthony, aged 27, came to Benjamin seeking a job. The pandemic had left him unemployed for nearly a year. Previously, Anthony had worked as a waiter at a fast food restaurant. He had a wife, Ashley, and a young daughter. Ashley, while supportive, grew frustrated as Anthony remained jobless, especially since their child would soon start school, requiring more money. Ashley herself sold accessories online but earned just enough to scrape by. Despite their financial struggles, she still indulged in her love for traveling with friends, feeling that she missed out on adventures after marrying young. Anthony, ashamed of staying home with nothing to contribute, pleaded with Benjamin for any kind of work. He wasn't picky, he just needed a salary to support his family. Benjamin, however, explained that he had no vacancies. Many people had come to him seeking work since the pandemic, and his positions were all filled. After discussing it with Samantha, Benjamin decided to offer Anthony a job as a backup security guard. It wasn't a full-time role since they already had a primary security guard and personal assistant, Christopher, aged 30, who had been with the family for 4 years. But it was something, a lifeline for Anthony to rebuild his life. Christopher was married with children, but he didn't mind when his boss, Mr. Benjamin, decided to hire Anthony as a backup security guard to help the man out financially. Christopher occasionally took on extra tasks like driving Mrs. Samantha to run errands, tending the garden, or looking after Mr. Benjamin's pets on days when he wasn't on guard duty. By August 2021, Anthony had been working as Mr. Benjamin's backup security for about 3 months. Around the same time, Mr. Benjamin started spending a lot of time out of town in Adiaman, working on post-pandemic health projects in partnership with local hospitals. His work included overseeing the construction of additional health facilities, which kept him away from home for extended periods. In his absence, Samantha often stepped in to handle community meetings and other local tasks on her husband's behalf. During one stretch, Benjamin was gone for an entire month. When Samantha tried to reach him, their phone conversations became tense. He was short-tempered, often snapping at her, which led to arguments. Benjamin, now 48, and Samantha, 43, seemed to be reaching a breaking point in their communication. While it was understandable that their jobs were stressful, the harshness between them added unnecessary strain to their relationship. Samantha couldn't shake her unease. She'd heard rumors about her husband possibly being involved in questionable financial dealings with his fellow board members, though there was no concrete proof. While Benjamin continued to carry out his work as usual, the whispers left Samantha feeling anxious and uncertain. Seeking comfort, she began opening up to Christopher during her husband's long absences. Secretly, Samantha had admired Christopher for quite some time, and her casual chats with him became more frequent. Christopher and Anthony both lived in another house owned by Mr. Benjamin, nicknamed the Warehouse House. It wasn't far from the main residence, and it served as their living quarters and a storage space for cars. The arrangement allowed Christopher and Anthony to stay near the family during the week while going home to visit their own families once a week. Samantha, however, started visiting the Warehouse House under the guise of casual conversation with Christopher. Over time, her feelings for him grew stronger. During one of these visits, her behavior became bolder. Her hands began to wander while she confided in him about her marital frustrations. Samantha complained about how her husband no longer seemed interested in making her feel happy or desired, and the boundary between employer and employee blurred in ways Christopher hadn't anticipated. When Anthony was assigned to help clean the main house, Christopher found himself reluctantly agreeing to comfort his employer's wife to keep her from becoming too stressed, or so he told himself. They avoided areas like the living room or bedroom because of the surveillance cameras, opting instead for the long sofa in the storeroom, where there were no cameras to worry about. For Christopher, pleasing his bosses was part of the job. His salary depended on it, and he felt he couldn't refuse when Mrs. Samantha sought his attention. Their relationship grew closer, especially as Samantha began relying on Christopher to drive her to various meetings while she filled in for her husband's duties. The more time they spent together, the more intimate their relationship became. Samantha even gave Christopher extra money as a reward for his additional services, which made it harder for him to say no. One evening in October 2021, after spending time with Christopher in the storeroom, Samantha noticed a shadow moving near the warehouse door. Moments later, she caught a glimpse of Anthony, who quickly hid, likely scared of being caught spying on them. The next morning, Anthony was called to the main house and questioned about what he had seen. Samantha demanded that he admit the truth, warning him that lying or spreading rumors would cost him his job. Feeling cornered, Anthony apologized and promised not to tell anyone. Under pressure, he eventually admitted that he had peeked several times but claimed it was accidental, an excuse Samantha found hard to believe. Perhaps worried Anthony might let something slip, Samantha decided to take matters into her own hands. While Christopher was off work visiting his family, Samantha visited the warehouse and confronted Anthony. She propositioned him, but when he refused, she threatened to fire him. To add to the pressure, she played the role of a lonely wife, lamenting how her husband hadn't come home in nearly 2 months. Her vulnerability made Anthony feel pity for her, and reluctantly, he gave in to her advances. Their encounters, too, took place on the sofa in the storeroom, and they happened more than once. What began as threats soon evolved into a complicated dynamic of guilt, power, and manipulation, leaving Anthony trapped in a situation he couldn't easily escape. On a Sunday in October 2021, Mr. Benjamin returned home, and tensions quickly surfaced between him and Samantha. According to the household assistant, their heated argument in the bedroom involved words like divorce, property division, and depression. Despite the tension, Benjamin arrived bearing gifts. Special souvenirs for their 8-year-old adopted son, presents for Christopher and his family, and even jewelry and other gifts for Anthony to give to his wife. To top it off, he gave Anthony additional money to help pay for his daughter's school fees. Anthony was deeply moved by the unexpected kindness. Overwhelmed, he even cried as he hugged his boss. The gesture made him feel both grateful and guilt-ridden, knowing what had happened while Benjamin was away. On Monday morning, as Anthony drove Benjamin to the office, the guilt became too much to bear. He confessed everything, that during Benjamin's 3 months away, Samantha had not only been involved with Christopher but had also pressured Anthony into satisfying her desires. Tearfully, Anthony apologized for betraying his boss, especially when Benjamin had shown him such generosity. Benjamin, though likely shocked, didn't show it. Instead, he reassured Anthony, telling him he wasn't at fault. According to Benjamin, it was Samantha who had taken advantage of both security guards. Then, quietly, Benjamin whispered something to Anthony, a plan to make things right and ensure there were no lingering grudges. On Tuesday night, around 11:30 p.m., Samantha received a message from Anthony, asking her to meet him at the warehouse for one of their usual flings. Thinking Benjamin was fast asleep, Samantha sneaked out of the main house and made her way to the warehouse. She noticed Christopher wasn't there, as he had been sent to sleep at the councilman's office that night. When she arrived, Anthony was waiting for her, but instead of an embrace, he attacked her with a kitchen knife he had hidden. He struck repeatedly until he was certain she was dead. Then, Anthony fled to the nearest police station and turned himself in. 3 hours later, the police arrived at Benjamin's house, banging on the door. The gardener let them in, and they headed straight to Benjamin's bedroom, arresting him on the spot. The scene outside was chaotic, with people and ambulances gathered. Following the investigation, the police revealed shocking details. It turned out that Benjamin had been seeing another woman in a diamond while claiming he was away for work. His supposed health facility projects were a cover for his secret relationship. Samantha had received credible information, including photos of Benjamin's intimacy with the other woman, which led to the argument overheard by the household assistant. Though divorce was discussed, Benjamin insisted on waiting until his term on the city council ended to avoid public embarrassment and protect their adopted child's feelings. When Benjamin learned from Anthony about Samantha's affair with the 2 security guards, he was hit with a mix of jealousy and anger. He realized Samantha wasn't the perfect wife he had once thought she was, and this revelation fueled his resentment. At the same time, he saw an opportunity to end his marriage and pursue a life with his mistress. When Anthony apologized for his involvement, Benjamin manipulated the young man's guilt and naivety. He convinced Anthony that the only way to make amends was to eliminate Samantha. He promised Anthony that after the act, he could flee to Leipzig, where all his needs would be taken care of, including a new job. To ensure the plan went smoothly, Benjamin instructed Anthony to arrange for Christopher to stay at the office the night of the incident. However, Anthony didn't follow through with the escape plan. After taking Samantha's life, he was overwhelmed with guilt and fear of divine punishment. Instead of running away, he turned himself in to the police. At the station, he confessed everything, providing evidence of chats and calls with Benjamin that implicated his employer. When officers discovered Samantha's lifeless body in the warehouse, they immediately arrested Benjamin. Though he initially denied involvement, he eventually confessed through his lawyer, fearing a harsher sentence if he withheld the truth. During his confession, Benjamin admitted that his relationship with Samantha had been strained for some time. While they had once been a happy couple, things began to deteriorate as Samantha's flirtations with younger men grew more frequent. On his side, Benjamin had fallen in love with another woman, which further complicated their marriage. The combination of her affairs and his resentment culminated in this tragic outcome. At the trial, which began in early 2022, Benjamin, who had been dismissed from his position as a councilman, addressed the court. He pleaded for leniency for Anthony, arguing that the young man was merely following his orders and had no personal motive to harm Samantha. Benjamin claimed full responsibility, stating he should bear the consequences alone. However, the prosecutor argued that the law must be upheld and that both parties were culpable. On Monday, March 21, 2022, the High Court of Malatya found Benjamin, now 51, guilty of orchestrating his wife's murder and sentenced him to life imprisonment. Anthony, who carried out the act, was sentenced to 15 years for his role in Samantha's death. Following the trial, Benjamin's adopted son was placed under the care of Benjamin's younger brother in Elazig. Christopher, who confessed to his involvement with Samantha, was also investigated. However, the court determined that his actions were limited to complying with the employer's advances. As a result, Christopher was acquitted of any charges and returned to his life, albeit with a tarnished reputation. What lessons can we learn from this story?